Dan Kalla is an emergency room physician in Vancouver, Canada, and he's a best-selling author of 7 books, and 2 of those books have been optioned to have movies made. Now, this is his most recent one. This is The Far Side of the Sky. Fascinating book that tells the story of Jews who escaped war-torn Second World War Europe and moved to Shanghai. And he joins me now. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
Oh, it was a pleasure to be here, Dan.
What prompted you to get involved in researching the Jews in Shanghai?
Well, my first novel had just come out, and I was very excited. I got an interview with a prominent interviewer from Reader's Digest, and she was a lovely woman. We had a great lunch and very professional. At the end, she just happened to mention that her parents grew up or were married in Shanghai. And this woman was clearly Jewish looking, and I said, how is that possible? How could you be from Shanghai? And she said, you didn't know about the Jews of Shanghai. And I said, no, I'd never heard of them. And it was embarrassing to me because my own family had escaped the Holocaust in various harrowing ways. And I was a bit of a World War II buff, and it always meant I was always very absorbed with the history, and particularly the history of the Holocaust. And I'd never heard this little slice of story. And the more I read about it, the more I read memoirs and saw documentaries, the more I thought, I can't be alone. Other people must not know this story. And sure enough, as I asked around, people didn't. And it's an amazing story of survival of 20,000 German Jews who literally escaped Hitler and Himmler and got to a very exotic place.
How did you bring the story alive, having not had any sort of obvious personal experience?
Well, as I said, I read about it. I spoke to some people who were there, but the key part was going there. Once I went to Shanghai, after I'd pored over the maps, and you know, I have a terrible sense of direction and get lost in my own hometown after 40 years. But when I got to downtown Shanghai, the old city, I knew where I was going because I'd spent so long researching and admiring this city. And so I went, and so much of the old city is still there. And so once I could smell it and see the old historical area where the Jews lived, and see the old synagogue that's now converted into a museum, I suddenly had a sense of these lives. And you know, and the reason I don't write nonfiction, and how I love to learn my history is through historical fiction, writers like Mishner and Leon Uris and Herman Wouk, and you know, so to create a story, to create some compelling characters, I drew on my own family's history. My father was a surgeon. He was a teenager in Hungary, but he survived the Holocaust to become a surgeon. And my hero is a surgeon, a very secular Jew in Austria who was married to a Gentile and didn't even see himself Jewish until the night of Kristallnacht, until the Nazis told him that's all he was, and he had to escape with his disabled daughter. And so I thought by bringing these characters, and then to bring Shanghai alive, my heroine is a Eurasian nurse. She's half Chinese, half American, and an outsider in her own city. And so with these 2 characters, and through these 2 characters, who are really 2 fish out of water, in a city of people who are fish out of water. I mean, there wasn't a more cosmopolitan city in the world than Shanghai. I was hoping I could capture this, and particularly tell the story of the Jews who emigrated there.
And you're saying that you really drew on the experience of both your grandparents and also your father escaping. How much of them is in this novel? A
lot, you know, and I didn't even realize it. My hero's name is Franz, and my father, who passed away 2 years ago, read this manuscript, and my dad was a tough critic, and my other books he was pretty hard on. He said I liked them, but you know, he always found fault. He said I loved this book, but he said, but if I wasn't a doctor or I wasn't Jewish, I'm not sure I would have liked it. But it wasn't until my cousin read the novel and said, you know, you're writing about your dad. And I said, I'm not writing about my dad. I don't use real people as my characters. And he pointed out that the hero's name is Franz, and my dad's name was Frank, and my dad was a surgeon, the hero was a surgeon. But more than that, they had the same kind of personalities, this unbelievable loyalty and faithfulness, and you know, also the pig-headed stubbornness. But all of those characteristics I drew on to create this character. So he really meant a lot to me, because I think he was a little bit based on my dad.
Well, Dan Kalla, thanks very much for sort of bringing alive an area of history, this story of the Jews in Shanghai that most people don't have much of an appreciation of. Thanks very much for talking to JN1 today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Daniel.